A lot of news to get into. First off, some subtle news to start. Joe Montana turned 65 on Friday. And it's kind of remarkable because at first I didn't think he was 65. And then I looked back and I was like, this guy retired after the 94 season. Like, I don't know if people really think of how long ago that's been. He's been in the Hall of Fame since 2000. So he's been in the Hall of Fame for more than 20 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, he is 65. Like, but you can't even figure that out. The fact that he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and he retired nearly a half century ago, or not a half century ago, but a quarter of a century ago, it's remarkable in many ways. Micah Parsons, moving on from Joe Montana, Micah Parsons, Cowboys rookie, he signed his 4-year rookie contract worth $17 million, $9 million guaranteed. Him, along with Oza Odigizua, signed their contracts. The only two rookies left for the Cowboys to sign is the 2 third-round picks, Nashawn Wright and Chauncey Golston. Number changes. Jalen Ramsey, who wore number 20 for the Rams, is now changing to the number 5. Julio Jones, who obviously changed teams early in the offseason, we all thought he was going to take number 11 from A.J. Brown. He did not. We all thought maybe he's going to wear number 8 because that's what he wore in Georgia, and he's going to wear the number 2. And that's kind of an interesting number to wear. Like, we heard that he wore 82 in high school, he wore 8 in college, he wore 11 with the Falcons, and now he's going to wear the number 2. You can't expect things like this. This just happened. It will be very interesting to see Julio in the number 2, but from videos that we saw of him working out at mandatory camp for the Titans, he looks really healthy and he looks ready to go. He also looks bigger than he has in a few years. So I'm excited to see what he can do. Moving to his former teammate, Calvin Ridley, had a minor surgery on his foot early in the offseason. It was a cleanup job. The doctor was Green Bay's team physician, Robert Anderson. Ridley did not participate in minicamp, but he is expected to participate in training camp. Cowboys signed, as I said, the Cowboys had signed Micah Parsons. It's a full guaranteed contract, so that means he'll get everything on this contract, including his 5th-year option. Cornerback Blitty Ray Wilson, the former Falcons player who's been with the Falcons for about 5 years, has now left and joined the Las Vegas Raiders. The 49ers signed veteran offensive lineman Suno Clemite. I think that's how it's said. If not, I probably butchered it. Who knows? Who has played tackle. He played with the Texans last year. He's a veteran. He's played a lot. He knows how to play the tackle position. He can pretty much play on any part of the offensive line besides center. So, I think it's a good pickup. And as if you remember, I said that what the 49ers would have to do would be either move people around to build up that O-line, or go get someone off the streets. And they ended up bringing someone off the streets. Some sad news if you're a fan of this player. Kyle Long, the former All-Pro for the Chicago Bears, now with the Kansas City Chiefs, suffered a lower leg injury earlier last week. It could keep him out of training camp and even potentially out of week 1 of the season. Now, the way this report was worded, it sounded like he was going to make the roster. Because it sounded like he was going to be there afterwards. Which, as Kyle Long has both played guard and tackle in his career, so and that's the thing that Chiefs need is a guard and tackle. So I think 1 week it's like, okay, but then we get like an all pro or used to be an all pro. We had to see what he's got left. We got some news on Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott leaves Adidas, who he's been with since his rookie year. Signs a 5-year deal with Jordan Brand. He's the only quarterback to be with Jordan, to be a part of the Jordan Brand. And everyone's like, oh, well, why would he do this? He was with Adidas for so long. Why would he do this? The NFL, in terms of being on a team and getting sponsors and doing all that kind of stuff, it's all about making money. And you know you only have such a long period of time to make big-time money. Like when Randall Cobb left the Cowboys a few years ago, I was like, well, I wish he would have stayed in Dallas. But I also understood, here's a guy who, this is probably his last big contract that he signs for big money. Go. Go. Take it. Why would the Cowboys and why would I stand in the way for him to leave and go get big pay? It doesn't make any sense. Same thing with this. Dak wanted a big sponsor and he got it. Now he's sponsored by Sleep Number and a few other places. And First Take obviously have to point this out and say, well, now he's over Baker Mayfield because a few years ago, Stephen A. Smith was saying how Baker Mayfield has more commercials than wins. Now he's saying that same thing with Dak. And it's like, well, you're the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. As many people refer to, it's either the shortstop or the center fielder of the New York Yankees. It's the biggest market. It's the place where you can make the most money, in which you got a big contract. Of course, he's going to get these big sponsors. Of course, that's just the way it works. I'm happy for him to get that kind of contract. To also be the only quarterback on the Jordan Brand. Way to build your reputation in a new marketplace and build up your brand with Jordan. Packers tight end Jace Sternberger suspended for 2 games without pay for breaking the substance of abuse program. We've seen this a lot. It happens. They normally have about, according to certain players or former players who played, they have like a window where they have to test for street drugs, and then that they only test for once a year, and then they have a window they have to test every so many weeks. Say, are you taking this? Because if you are, we have to do this. So it's sad, but it does happen, and you feel for these guys to not get paid for 2 weeks is a big deal. He can return, though, after the game against Detroit in Week 3. Hunter Henry suffered a lower leg injury, did not return. At first, we thought it was his foot, then it was his foot and ankle, but he was just kept out of practice. They retaped it, and he was fine. So it just happens sometimes. It's sad, but injuries do happen. Seahawks excused Jamal Adams from mandatory camp this week, mandatory minicamp, for personal reasons. We were told by a report that maybe it's because he's holding out for a contract. Well, we have to wait and see. No information was really much given out. Jets restructured Jamison Crowder's contract, so he's a free agent after this year. Jamison Crowder's 28. Probably his last year to make a big contract. Smart move on his part. Dolphins linebacker Jerome Baker agreed. The Dolphins and Jerome Baker have agreed on a 3-year contract extension worth $39 million, $28.4 million guaranteed. Eagles signed backup quarterback Nick Mullins to be part of now the quarterback room that contains Jalen Hurts and Joe Flacco. Vikings and pass rusher Darnell Hunter have agreed to a reworked contract that will give Hunter significant money moved up to his bonus to make more money this year and wait later in the year. And Minnesota gets one of the stars to report back to camp. And as Ian Rappaport said, it's a win-win. The Vikings there's more to the Vikings on this. Jason Kelce likely to retire after the 2021 season, and I feel bad for Jason Kelce. He's played a whole career, and he's been good, no fault of his own, but he just had so many quarterbacks behind him. It's sad, and he's a tough guy. He's played it many years. He's been very good, probably one of the better centers in the league. It's sad, but it's time. It's when that time comes, it's time for you to go. It's just the way it works. Cowboys signed wide receiver Reggie Davis, who had a substance abuse issue earlier in his career, so this is his second chance to make the team. He was on the Cowboys practice squad from 2018 to 2019, but the Cowboys had to make a roster cut, and they waived Stephen Guidry, another wide receiver they had, who signed a kind of a developmental deal, but then opted out. So the chances of him making the roster weren't very high, but that's what ended up happening. Packers president Mike Murphy and general manager Brian Gutekunst possibly made the stupidest decision they ever could have made. Possibly. It's very possible. It's idiotic, really, to be honest with you. They went and said, and they just blurred this out, Mike Murphy did, blurred this out, and he said, talking on a at a press conference, he was saying how he basically, and I'll say half of the quote is, he said, talking about the Rodgers situation, he said, he, as in Rodgers, is a complicated fella. Well, this is a guy who was overlooked in high school, never got a college offer to a D1 school, went to JUCO college, transferred, went to Cal, wasn't the starter at Cal, became the starter, then he got looked over in the draft when he dropped 21 picks. Of course, on his shoulder, he has a dang boulder on his shoulder for his whole career. The same thing happens with Tom Brady, who went 6 rounds before getting drafted. It's the same thing. But with Tom, he wasn't expected to be a first-round pick. With Aaron, he was expected to be probably the first overall pick, and he wasn't. But then he also goes and said a few weeks ago, he said, he, as in Rodgers, is dividing up our fan base. What are you talking about? If anything, you're the one who's doing it. You've alienated Rodgers for many years. I was listening to Chuck Pagano, who was on the Pat McAfee show last week, and he said this: I would throw my body and die before I leave Rodgers. I would let Rodgers walk out of my office. That's what I do. And that's a big thing to say, because Chuck had coached against Aaron for years. When he was just an offensive line coach, when he was the defensive line coach or the defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears. So he's coached against Aaron. He knows this. And yet, he's the one saying this. This is what I would have done if I was the Packers. If you said, well, we've made so many efforts. We've flew down to see Aaron many times. We've tried to have him come back. He doesn't want to, and all this stuff. They haven't fined him yet, but that probably is possible that they will do soon. But if I'm the Packers, this is what I do. I fly down to see Aaron. I call Aaron. I say, Aaron, I got a proposition for you. This is the way we can meet in the middle. We'll restructure your contract. This year, you got a few years left on your contract. We'll void those years. You become a free agent after this year. But you have to play for us this year. That way, next year, you can go wherever you want. You can sign back here, or you can go wherever. I'm not saying that he would say yes to that. But I'm saying this. He'd probably have to think about that. So it's like, there is a good position. Now, I'm not saying he will say yes. But I think that's the best thing you can do, I think, if you're Green Bay. Otherwise, trade him, cut him, do what you gotta do. But you have to figure it out. I think, personally, if you're the Packers, this works for both of you. This gives you a year to try and have Aaron come back and sign a whole new contract. Or, it's over. It's the way it goes. Sheldon Richardson and the Vikings agreed to terms on a contract. Richardson played for the Vikings in 2018. He had 4.5 sacks and 49 tackles. Is he the same guy? No, but he still played pretty well in Cleveland. And now that Vikings defense looks really good. They have Donnell Hunter, Sheldon Richardson, and now Patrick Peterson as the cornerback. They're going to be really good. Xavier Howard, holding out for a new contract, could request a trade. Same as going on pretty much with Stephon Gilmore. Xavier Howard had 10 interceptions last year, 21 pass breakups. He had a lot thrown his way, but it's really not his fault. He played well. Gilmore, he's coming off a partially torn quad. It's very rough for him. I don't think he'll get traded, but who knows. And finally, Kyle Shanahan said Trey Lance could start week 1. Possibly creating the narrative that, hey, he has a chance to start week 1, along with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, obviously himself, Mac Jones, and potentially Mac Jones and Justin Fields as well. But what do you guys think? Should Trey Lance start week 1? You decide.